It's November 22nd, 1987, Chicago, Illinois. A cold Sunday night. Thousands of people are at home, doing what people did before smartphones, before YouTube, before endless scrolling. They're watching television. Some are watching the local news. Some are half asleep on the couch. Some are waiting for a late-night episode of Doctor Who. Everything is normal until the screen cuts out. For a few seconds, there is nothing. No warning. No station logo. No explanation. Then, a face appears. A distorted rubber mask. Dark sunglasses. A stiff plastic grin. A body swaying in front of a spinning metal background. The figure says almost nothing the first time. Just static. Buzzing. A strange movement that feels less like a person, and more like a signal trying to become human. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the broadcast returns to normal. The anchor is confused. The viewers are confused. The station is confused. But this is not the end. Because 2 hours later, the same figure comes back. And this time, he speaks. To understand why this image was so strange, you have to understand who Max Headroom was. In the 1980s, Max Headroom was everywhere. He was a fictional digital TV host, a glitchy, cyberpunk character with slicked-back hair, plastic-looking skin, dark sunglasses, and a stuttering voice that sounded like a computer trying to imitate a human being. But here's the strange part. Max Headroom was not actually computer-generated, even though many people believed he was. The effect was created with makeup, lighting, editing, and performance. It was a human actor made to look like a machine. And somehow, the illusion worked. Max Headroom looked like the future. Or at least, what the 1980s thought the future would look like. Corporate, artificial, loud, glitchy, and completely addicted to television. He appeared in shows, advertisements, music videos, and pop culture. He became a symbol of media saturation, a talking head from inside the machine, a character built to mock television while also becoming part of it, which makes what happened in Chicago even stranger, because the person who hijacked the airwaves did not choose a monster mask. They did not choose a political symbol. They did not hold up a manifesto. They chose Max Headroom, a character who was already supposed to look like a broadcast interruption, a face that already felt artificial, a voice that already sounded broken, a symbol that belonged to television, suddenly forced back into television in the most literal way possible. It was almost too perfect, like someone had taken television's own satire of itself, twisted it into something darker, and pushed it back through the screen. And on one Sunday night in 1987, that image stopped being entertainment. It became evidence. At around 9:14 p.m., WGN-TV is airing its regular 9 o'clock news. The sports segment is underway. The anchor, Dan Roan, is reporting on the day's Chicago Bears game. For viewers at home, this is routine local television. Familiar, predictable, safe. Then the screen goes black. For a moment, there is no explanation, no station logo, no emergency message, no technical difficulties card, just absence. And then, the figure appears. A person wearing a Max Headroom-style mask and dark sunglasses is standing, or maybe swaying, in front of what looks like a rotating sheet of corrugated metal. The image is unstable. The sound is mostly a loud buzz. The figure rocks back and forth, almost like a puppet hanging from invisible strings. It is strange enough that some viewers may not even understand what they are seeing at first. Is it a joke? A technical error? Some kind of local station prank? But inside the broadcast chain, this is not funny. Someone has forced their way into the signal. After roughly half a minute, WGN regains control. The broadcast snaps back to the studio. Dan Roan is back on screen, and he says what everyone watching is probably thinking. If you're wondering what happened, so am I. It is the kind of moment local news is not built for. A fire? They can cover that. An election? No problem. A sports upset? Easy. But a masked intruder appearing inside the broadcast itself. That is different, because this is not someone breaking into a building. This is someone breaking into the signal. And for a few seconds, viewers are not watching WGN anymore. They are watching whoever this person wants them to watch. 2 hours later, the answer arrives. At around 11:20 p.m., another Chicago station is on the air. This time, it is WTTW, the city's PBS station. They are broadcasting Doctor Who, specifically the serial horror of Fang Rock. It is late. The audience is smaller. The mood is quieter. And then the signal is taken again. The same masked figure appears, but this time, there is audio.
He's a freaking nerd. I think I'm gonna just work.
Distorted. Warped. Difficult to understand. The figure moves erratically, speaking in a strange, high-pitched voice. He references television culture, local broadcasters, and inside jokes that feel both random and deliberate. It is not a demand. It is not a warning. It is not even clearly a message. It is more like a performance, a broadcast from someone who wants to be seen, but not understood. The video continues. The background spins behind him. The mask catches the light in a way that makes it feel less like a face and more like a frozen expression. There are jump cuts, uncomfortable pauses, a sense that whoever made this knows exactly how strange it looks. Then the broadcast becomes even more bizarre. The figure bends over. Another person appears at the edge of the frame. There is a fly swatter. The scene becomes crude, chaotic, and almost impossible to explain without making it sound fake. But it is not fake. People saw it live. WTTW receives calls from confused viewers asking what just happened. And unlike WGN, the station cannot quickly stop it. Because at that moment, there are no engineers on duty at the affected transmitter site. For about 90 seconds, the pirates own the signal. Then, the interruption ends. Doctor Who returns, as if nothing happened. But something did happen. For a minute and a half, an unknown person hijacked a television station in one of America's biggest cities, and then disappeared. Today, when people hear the word hack, they usually imagine code, a laptop, a password, a dark room, maybe a hoodie, because apparently every hacker in stock footage owns the same hoodie. But the Max Headroom incident was not that kind of hack. This was broadcast piracy. In simple terms, television stations in 1987 relied on analog signals and microwave links to move programming from one point to another. For example, from a studio to a transmitter tower, and then out toward the people watching at home. If someone could send their own signal toward the receiving equipment, and if that signal was stronger than the legitimate one, the system could lock onto the wrong source. Think of it like two people shouting into the same microphone. The station is the person who is supposed to be speaking. The hijacker is someone who suddenly steps closer and shouts louder. For a short time, the microphone picks up the wrong voice. That is the basic idea. But pulling it off is not simple. You need transmitting equipment. You need technical knowledge. You need line of sight to the receiving antenna. You need to know where to aim. And you need enough power to overpower a professional broadcast link. This is why the incident immediately feels different from an ordinary prank. Whoever did this was not just weird. They were capable. They understood something about Chicago's broadcast infrastructure. They knew when to strike, and they knew how to vanish before anyone could respond. After the hijackings, the Federal Communications Commission begins investigating. Broadcast signal intrusion is serious. Even if the content is absurd, the act itself is not. The airwaves are regulated, stations are licensed, signals are coordinated, so emergency information, news, and public communication can reach people reliably. A person who can take over a TV station for a joke could, in theory, take over a station for something much worse. That is part of what makes the incident so unsettling. The content is ridiculous. The capability is not. Investigators consider the technical requirements. The person or group behind it likely had to be somewhere within range of the receiving equipment. They may have used a rooftop, a nearby building, or possibly a mobile setup. They may have needed more than one person. One person on camera. One person operating equipment. Maybe someone else helping with timing, aiming, or monitoring the broadcast. Some reports and later analysis suggest this was not random. The hijackers seemed to know which stations were vulnerable and when. WGN was able to stop the first intrusion relatively quickly. WTTW was not. That difference may help explain why the second broadcast lasted longer. But even with an investigation, no confirmed suspect emerges. No one is arrested. No one is charged. No one comes forward with proof. And as time passes, the trail cools. The physical evidence is limited. The technology ages. Memories fade. The broadcast becomes a legend, a tape copied from tape to tape, uploaded years later, compressed, restored, analyzed, laughed at, feared, and replayed by people who were not even alive when it happened. But the central question remains untouched. Who was behind the mask? The first major theory is that the hijacking was an inside job. Not necessarily someone currently working at a station, but someone with broadcast experience. Maybe a former employee. Maybe a technician. Maybe someone who knew enough about studio to transmitter links to exploit them. This theory makes sense for one reason. The hijacking required knowledge most people did not have. The second theory points toward Chicago's underground tech culture. In the 1980s, there were communities of people interested in phones, radio systems, hacking, signal manipulation, and communications technology. Not everyone in those circles was malicious. Many were curious, experimental, obsessed with systems. But curiosity, plus equipment, plus a desire to make history, can become a dangerous combination. A third theory is that the people responsible were simply highly skilled pranksters with access to the right gear. This might sound less dramatic, but it may actually be closer to the truth. Because the strangest part of the Max Headroom incident is not that it contains some hidden message. It is that it might not. Maybe there is no grand motive, no secret code, no political statement, no underground manifesto. Maybe the entire point was simply to prove it could be done, to interrupt the machine, to force a city to look at something it could not explain, and then leave. That possibility is almost more disturbing, because if there is no message, then the broadcast is not a puzzle. It is a void. A person in a mask staring through a stolen signal saying, "You do not control what appears in your own living room." The Max Headroom signal hijacking is often described as creepy. But why? No one was physically harmed. No building exploded. No ransom was demanded. No government secrets were revealed. On paper, it was a bizarre act of broadcast piracy, a strange prank, a technical stunt. But emotionally, it feels bigger than that. Because television used to be trusted in a way the internet never was. A TV broadcast felt official, stable, centralized. If something appeared on television, especially local television, it felt like it had passed through a system, a station, a control room, a network of professionals. The Max Headroom hijacking shattered that feeling. For a brief moment, the viewer saw behind the curtain. The signal was not sacred. The screen was not protected. The living room was not sealed off from the outside world. Someone could force their way in. And they did not even need to explain themselves. That is why the footage still circulates decades later. Not because it is polished. It is not. Not because it is terrifying in a traditional way. There is no monster, no blood, no chase. It is unsettling because it feels wrong at the deepest possible level. A human body performing like a broken machine. A mask pretending to be a face. A message that refuses to become a message. A signal with no sender. And somewhere behind it all, a person or a group of people carried out one of the most infamous broadcast intrusions in American history, then walked away. More than 3 decades later, the Max Headroom hijacking remains unsolved. The statute of limitations has long expired. The technology has changed. Analog television is gone. The world that made this hijacking possible barely exists anymore. But the footage remains. A strange little transmission from 1987. A man in a mask. A spinning metal sheet. A stolen signal. A room somewhere in Chicago that no one has ever found. Maybe the people behind it are still alive. Maybe they have watched the footage become internet folklore. Maybe they have read the theories. Maybe they have seen strangers online get close to the truth. Or maybe the real story is much simpler. Maybe on one cold Sunday night, someone looked at the most powerful screen in the average American home and decided to remind everyone that it could be taken. For 90 seconds, Chicago television belonged to a ghost in a rubber mask. And then the ghost disappeared.